Thank you, everyone, for being here for our first event of 2020. And we couldn't think of a better person to kick it off than Representative Terri Bryant, who is, of course, a fixture in the community. My wife and I, every time we go out, we see Terri attending events, listening, participating, just being deeply interested in the community. Terri, as you probably know, is a native of the area from Murfreesboro. Worked from 1994 to 2014 for the Department of Corrections, when she ran for office in 2014 and was elected to represent the 115th District. She's become a fixture in Springfield in the relatively short period of time, and I think, as everyone knows, has been a very steadfast and devoted champion of SIU, has fought for the university and in every venue and every corner. And I'll say but the first time I met Terri, I was at a community event, a neighborhood event, and it began about 7 o'clock at night, and about 8:30, 8:45, and I live only 2 or 3 blocks away, I'm thinking, okay, I'm ready to go home now. And Terri made a couple remarks and then excused herself and said, I have to go to Springfield tonight, and drove the 3 hours. And this was before I had driven on 127 at night, and then 4. And so the next time I took a trip to Springfield in the daylight, I had a deeper appreciation for what she did. We probably got into her apartment in Springfield close to 11:30 or 12. So what we'd like to do in terms of format is I'm going to turn it over to Representative Bryant. She's going to outline some of her views on what's happening in Springfield now. Then she's going to sit down, and she and I are going to have a conversation for about 2 minutes while all of you are thinking of your questions, and then we will turn it over to you and have a good Q&A session. So with that, let me introduce Representative Terri Bryant.
And you want me to come up here then?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's an awful lot of nice things to say about me. I don't know if can you see me over this? I'm pretty short. I brought a few notes with me just because I want to make sure I hit on some topics that I think we'll want to talk about tonight. First, let me say thank you for the invitation tonight and for the kind words. A lot of folks don't know this about me, but I did not grow up in deep southern Illinois. I was actually born in Gary, Indiana, accidentally. My dad was building McDonald's when they were first opening, and my mother was only 16, my dad was 18, and my mother just happened to give birth in Gary. So I claim Indiana. My dad's family's from Kentucky, and I'm really from Illinois. So I'm a lot like Abraham Lincoln, right? But I actually went to grade school in the Metro East. I lived in East St. Louis till I was 5, and then went to grade school in Belleville and Fairview Heights. My grandparents are from Ava and Willisville, and they really helped to raise my 2 sisters and I. Great mom, but my mom was very young when she started out, and so we were in and out with my grandparents a lot. My husband's from Ava. And once my grandparents retired, then of course, I love being down here. I hunt, I fish, I trapped when I was younger. I'd like to do that again someday if I ever really retire. And just love the outdoors. So this was a perfect place to be. And so I went to Trico for a couple of years when we moved down here. And then my mom moved us to South Florida. So I went to high school in South Florida. So I'm a bit of really hometown grown from this area, but I also have a really good feel for the more urban areas, which I think sometimes people assume that because you are from deep southern Illinois, maybe you really don't understand a more urban culture. So I was really blessed to be able to live I know Chicago is really the melting pot of the country, but so is Broward and Dade County, Florida. So I was able to live in an area that really had an influx of South and Central America, as well as Canada, Haiti, Cuba. I served in the Republican Party as the coordinator for coalitions for a few years, and one of the things I tried to make the Republican Party understand was when you're trying to go after the Hispanic vote, number one, they don't like to be called Hispanic. They would prefer to be called Latino. Cubans really want to be called Cuban. Brazilians speak Portuguese, so you can't just lump everyone in together. So I hope that that's made me well-rounded and better legislator because I have the ability to reach out to some other cultures and also understand that it's not all about Southern Illinois, but also in that my first couple years in Springfield, I really wanted to take an approach as a legislator where I said, look, you can't just be Southern Illinois centric. We have to get the state on the right path, and so you have to have a much broader approach. And I did that for a couple years. But then I found that even though I might care for other parts of this state, they don't necessarily care about us. So in the last few years, I've tried to keep still a broad attitude about things, but you'll find that my campaign slogan these days is Southern Illinois first. For two reasons. One, because I represent this region, and I have to be the voice for this region. But I'm also using it as a tool to educate the rest of the state that Illinois started, developed, and grew from the south north. And the richest part of history in this state is right here where we are. I got a chance a couple years ago to participate in a cemetery walk where I don't want to call them characters because it was a human being, but I was Betsy Hacker, who is the wife of John Hacker from Jonesboro. Just real quick, some neat things about him just to show how rich our history is. John Hacker was appointed by 4 different presidents to different jobs, but he was also the state representative from Jonesboro, Democrat. He was a Democrat senator from Jonesboro. So although I'm the Republican rep and hope to be the senator, John Hacker was the Democrat from there, right? He later, he owned an inn, which at that time would have kind of been a bar and grill, right? Bed and breakfast, bar and grill. But he became a Methodist at some point, and so he led the temperance movement for the region, and historically there's no evidence that he ever applied for a liquor license again. And then he later became the doorkeeper for the U.S. Congress. So just lots of history here, and those are things that when we're able to talk to folks in the Springfield area, especially those who represent Chicago, becomes very important to us. Representative Severin today shared a story, it was Darren Bailey. Representative Bailey shared a story today about being in a committee when these working groups, when we're putting the budget together, and you close the doors, there's butcher paper that goes up on the windows so no one can see what's going on in there. They're very private meetings. And then you have the above the line and below the line budgetary stuff. And you try to cut the budget where you can. You add things on wherever. But Darren talked about a conversation he had in K through 12 funding where they needed to cut $1.8 billion out of the budget. And the first thing on the line was transportation. And one of the individuals in there said, that's $900 million, we're halfway there. Fortunately, Darren Bailey was on the committee, so he was able to say, wait a minute, transportation for us is very different. In fact, in one area of Darren's district, a bus will travel about 150 miles per day picking up and dropping kids off, where a Chicago legislator that said that, their bus travels 3 miles. 3 miles compared to our 150. So our voice is very important. Whether you are Democrat or Republican is not as important as it is whether or not you know this region and the dynamics of what we have to, the issues that we have that are not, they're unique to our area. And maybe not unique to just our area, but certainly to the more rural areas of Illinois. So I've got a list of things to talk about. Do you want to kind of open it up, and if we don't hit on these,
you and I start, and then
sure,
we'll open it up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't leave anything off. So.
But let's even start with where you ended it about, where is Illinois now? We've had a new governor who's been in office for a year or so. And there's sort of 2 schools of thought. One is some big fundamental things were done last year that have put the state on a new trajectory. Others say, well, not the really hard decisions weren't made. And the real fundamental problems are still looming off in the distance. How would you assess the governor after a year and where you think the state is now politically?
So let me just start off with him personally. It was as a Republican with a Republican governor, I was able to get in and see Bruce Rauner from time to time. Governor Rauner's approach was to kind of answer the way I wanted him to answer often, and then not do what he had said that what he told me he was going to do. Governor Pritzker's approach is, it's actually been easier to get in to see him. Quite often, his response to me will be, well, I'm not going to be able to do what you're asking me to do. But he does it with a smile. He's pretty jolly kind of guy. But he does exactly what he says he's going to do. So I don't like it very often, but he does exactly what he says he's going to do. So if the things that he does are things that you like, then he's a pretty straightforward guy. I don't often agree with him. I'll give you an example. I wanted to have a little bit of say in the trustees for the SIU board. And so he was kind enough to meet with me on that. I had only one ask on the board specifically, and his response to me was, well, I can't give you what you're asking for, but you're not going to be unhappy with what you get. And that was true. I was not unhappy with ultimately what happened. Would I have done it differently? Probably, but I'm not the governor, right? Another situation, I was in the office talking to him about Department of Corrections, and as we finished up our conversation on that particular day, he said, you're gonna vote with me today on my bill, right? And I said, I had to think for a minute, and I said, the $15 an hour minimum wage? And he said, yeah, you'll be with me on that, right? And I said, oh, sir, I'm going to be a hell no on that one, right? So we laughed a little bit about it, and he knew where I was going to be. I knew where he was going to be. So there's no animus between us, but we don't necessarily agree on some of these big issues that have come up. The $15 hour minimum wage, for instance, when I talked to him, many of us down here asked for consideration of regionalization. And his response was, well, let's just get this passed first and then we'll revisit it. So right now we're pushing to revisit. Clearly I'm in a super minority. We sometimes refer to it as a super duper minority. In the House, when I go over to the Senate, we're in more of a super minority even than in the House. So it becomes incumbent on someone who's in a minority to be sure that you keep a line of conversation open. And I also believe in politics that you make enemies just by the nature of what politics is. So don't create enemies if you don't have to. Don't purposely create an enemy. So I don't view Governor Pritzker as my enemy. I do sometimes view him as an adversary on an issue that he and I do not agree on.
Let me ask one other question, and then we'll turn it to everyone else. In terms of the regional economy, there was an article in the Southern, I think it was last week, about Southern Illinois leading the state in terms of job growth. Mm-hmm. What is your sense of that? Do you think that something fundamentally different has happened to the economy down here, or do you think it's a cyclical factor? Are there still serious structural constraints to job creation that concern you?
Well, sure. So two things. One, I think when we look around and realize how few jobs we really have here, I think that statement says a lot about how difficult it is in the rest of the state. But I also know that one of the drivers of the jobs that we're seeing right now is the amount of road miles that we have here. So with the new infrastructure bill in place, and I know that there are a lot of folks who are very upset about the motor fuel tax increase, but the fact that people need to realize is we were at a place as a state where if the Trump administration is able to get their infrastructure bill through, that they're going to try this next year, we would not have been able to leverage that. You have to have matching dollars, and we had no matching dollars. So when everyone was kind of talking about the need to fix I-57, we all agree that that has to happen, and then everyone wants me to try to find the dollars, but the dollars have to come mostly from the feds. We did not have the money to leverage that. But now we're going to see an influx of jobs that really trickle over to other areas. So we're going to see, I think we have a lot of road miles here. So we're going to see a lot of construction going on. We saw a lot this summer, late summer. Most of the lettings didn't happen until very late because they usually happen in the spring, and we didn't pass the budget until late May, so those lettings didn't go out until July. We will see a lot of that coming up now in the spring and going into the summer of this year. So just to give you an example of some of these jobs, operating engineers told me that 2 years ago they had 3 apprentices. I'm sorry, 2 years ago they had 0. Last year they had 3 apprentices for operating engineers. Those are good paying jobs, and their jobs are going to be long term because IDOT, E.T. Simon, Sierra Bravo, Samron, they all have people who are retiring. So these young people that are getting apprenticeships now, they're going to be there for the next 20 years or so. Last year they had 3. This year they wanted to have 17. They have 40. And they're looking to continue, and they keep telling us, if people who are, they're the prime place that they want to recruit is about 18 to 28, maybe who don't have a lot of financial responsibilities, because when you're in an apprenticeship, you don't work every day. But my nephew got on with them and worked every day from the time he started. So think about the fact that we're going to have road work going on. We don't have enough people here to fill those jobs, so maybe this is pie in the sky, but I hope some of the young people that left to go to other states will come back because now there's work in our region. Maybe it's a 5-year job, maybe it's a 10-year job. When they come, they're either going to rent or they're going to buy, and then they spend money while they're here. So I think that that's going to be a boom to the economy. So we can argue about taxes. We can argue about, whether it's about creating more jobs. I personally think that it's a mixture of both. In this case, we needed to have the dollars for the infrastructure that was needed, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we have jobs so folks can afford some of what we're doing. I hope we're going to talk. I have to be careful what I say about the graduated income tax, and I know we have a very mixed group here, but can I address that for just a second? Okay. So because it's on the ballot and it's a ballot initiative, legislators are prohibited from advocating for or against. I am allowed to tell you how I voted and why when it comes to putting it on the ballot, but I have to keep it very short, they told me. So the graduated income tax or the progressive income tax or the fair tax or whatever anyone wants to call it, I voted no on putting it on the ballot, and it's really for a very simple reason for myself. When I voted to increase the income tax, I voted for it because, number one, we had to have it to save this university and 8 other universities in this state. And we had to pay our bills. I'm a conservative Republican who believes that you have to pay your bills. You cannot stiff vendors when they've done business with the state any more than it's right for someone to file for bankruptcy if they have the ability to pay those bills. But when I came home, I had to face everyone after voting for that, and it was brutal. To raise taxes, it should be brutal for a legislator to do that. So I voted no because I don't want to have the ability for the legislature to just pass a bill that slides that scale up and down. And a legislator could assign those brackets in a way, because everybody meets in a room when they're setting up maps, right? They could go in another room and say it's safe to set the brackets up in a way that doesn't affect this group of people or doesn't affect this group of people. In my humble opinion, I think everyone should have to feel the pain when you raise taxes. And you should have to go home and may not get reelected because you've made a decision to do that. So that's my stand on it.
Okay. Well, let's open it up to you and questions from the audience.
I'll start out first with a dual question a little bit. First one I'm going to do, since you talked about the roads and gas and our taxes that way. I really question sometimes some of our legislatures, like what just came out the other day there, and we're talking about for the gas stations to now have people pump the gas and do that. I don't understand what they're trying to do there, but I do know just a little bit about business. I do know that labor is a high cost of business. And to put that out there and do that, Illinois will pay so much more in gas that we're already one of the highest. Why we want to do that? And the second part of my question is a totally different subject, but I'd like you to comment about, the map is so important. How we get the map to be done fairly and do this, which also ties into how do we make our legislatures more honest, that we are trustworthy in doing this, because we are having a big problem seeing that across Illinois.
So to your first, every legislator gets approached by constituents, and I was asked for a comment tonight for WSIL, and I don't really want to beat up Camille Lilly because she's really an awesome lady, and she's usually very thoughtful. My guess is Camille had somebody that this was important to, and it's sometimes Rich Miller with Cap Facts titles them, "It's just a bill, and it won't move." So I don't know so my statement to WSIL was, I do not know what's going on in Camille Lilly's district, but it's not good for this region, and we have a lot more important things to talk about than that, right? So I always hesitate to say something won't move because the craziest stuff moves, but I really think it's just a bill. But this pushback last year, there was a bill that LaShawn Ford had. I can't remember now what it was. It had to do with, it was really a divorced fathers kind of bill, and he got such serious pushback on it. By the time we came back to Springfield, which we'll go back Tuesday, he pulled it, right? So they just tabled the bill. To your question about fair maps, so Governor Pritzker during campaign made a campaign promise that he would make sure that there were fair maps. I don't think anybody really nailed him down to what that meant to him. In the last couple of days, basically what he has said is that if he sees a map that clearly was not bipartisan, where both sides got a chance to sit down and at least have some input on it, he says he'll veto that bill. I think he's sincere when he says that. But the issue is there's a supermajority in the House, there's a supermajority in the Senate. So pretty much the Senate and the House can do whatever they want to do and override the governor's veto if that comes up. So I think that from home, wherever that is for everyone in Illinois, we have to continue to pressure legislators into understanding that it has to be a fair map. Now, I think that I don't know what the deadline was. There's two ways that you can get this on the ballot. One is the legislators can put 3 questions on the ballot, constitutional questions on the ballot. So the legislature could still do that. I don't think that Speaker Madigan will allow it, but it's possible that it could get on there. The other way is through signatures, right, petitions. And I don't know where they are in the signatures right now. I think they have enough signatures to do it. But when we've had this in the past, it went to court the first time. I don't remember the order of this, but the first time it went, it was because it was supposed to be done by the legislature. Someone challenged it, I think, and the court threw it out and said, you have to do it this way. So the next time they did it, which was the last time, they did it exactly the way the courts said it had to be done. And then someone challenged it, and the courts came back and said, no, you can't do it that way, and said it should have been done the way it was done the first time. So you have all of these competing courts that come up with stuff, all of this stuff. If we don't get it on the ballot this time, it doesn't matter for another decade. This is the ballot. The November ballot is the one it has to be on in order for it to matter after the census. Otherwise, we've got another 10 years to do it. So I would like to believe that we could take Governor Pritzker at his word and that he would veto it, and then hopefully he would have enough stroke with legislators to say, don't override this, go back to the drawing board. So I'm not a glass half full person. I am a glass full, pressed down, shaken, and running over into my lap. Okay, so I will continue to have that thought until I'm proven wrong. So that's my hope, George.
Before we take a question, we have a couple seats up front, so if anyone is sitting or standing back there and would like to sit, we will not take umbrage for you walking in front of us. So, ma'am, did you have a question?
This morning on the radio, I seat. Will that affect you in the future, assuming you're elected?
Well, the census is going to affect all elected officials. So it's super important. I'm glad you asked that question, because it is super important that we make sure that every person down here is counted. As they do the reapportionment, we know for sure we're going to lose one seat. The going consensus is that it will probably be the seat that John Shimkus is in right now. That would mean, depending on how it's drawn, could mean that from just south of Springfield south would be our congressional district down here. And so, but it can be drawn differently. So many of you might remember when David Phelps was the congressman from here. I don't remember what drove this, but I believe his district went from like Cairo to Kankakee. And then I believe at that point David Phelps decided not to run again because he had small children then. So it can be done any weird way that they want. But when you have one party drawing the maps and the majority of sitting congressmen or sitting legislators are in a particular region, well, that's the ones you draw out, right? If you are Democrats drawing the map, you're not going to draw a Democrat out. If you're a Republican drawing the maps, you're not going to draw a Republican out. So, of course, you know, here, really, there are very few Democrats from below the suburbs right now. So it certainly will be in this region. The three districts that are kind of in danger, because we could have two, possibly, depending on whether or not we are able to get everyone counted. The three that I think are in danger are Mike Bost's district, John Shimkus, and Rodney Davis. And so you're talking about maybe from north of Decatur, Taylorville, Decatur, across all the way south. Those three districts are the ones that are being mentioned. On legislative districts, we've lost population. So we will, right now I represent 108,000. One or two, right? Somewhere in there. Everyone has just about that number. I think they're probably going to be somewhere around 106,000 this time, and it probably will, geographically, will be just a little bit more. You have a district that was, the way the maps were drawn last time were really for incumbents. So the maps were drawn so that Mike Bost's district became more Republican. Jerry Costello, John Bradley, and Brandon Phelps became more Democrat. John Bradley was very close to the speaker, and so he is this very nice little almost square kind of district that you can drive in 30 minutes, the whole district. Mike Bost, who wasn't necessarily liked much by Speaker Madigan, is the district that I hold now, goes from the Alexander Union County line to the Marion Jefferson County line. So figure 30 minutes north of Mount Vernon to about 20 minutes south of Anna, 150 miles long. It takes me 2+ hours to drive from one end to the other, not including if I were going around in it. So I think we're going to see maybe a little bit of that, but then some of the conversation is leave everybody alone down south, because, I mean, I'm speaking very broadly, but some of the Democrat leadership says, we've lost the South to the Republicans, let them have it, let's concentrate on the suburbs, right? So we may see some of that as far as the state maps go. Did I get all your question? Is that all of it?
I'm just worried about you.
I'm good, thank you for, yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm good. I live in Murfreesboro, so it's not that they can't draw me out, but I don't know how you draw Murfreesboro out of the 58th Senate District or the 115th. So, yeah, could be done. I'll move. Rick won't be very happy.
Well, could you tell us the kind of a typical week in your life in session? I mean, how much are you traveling within the district, back and forth between Springfield and Murfreesboro?
So in theory, this year, the legislative calendar includes, I believe it's 52 days in Springfield. That usually boils down to about 45 or so. So 45 days-ish actually in Springfield. Besides being in Springfield, I know Thursday of this next week I'll be in Chicago The Chicago legislators do not like to travel south when we're not in session, so they tend to have the hearings in Chicago at the Bladnick building. So poor Patrick Windhorst and I have the long travel day on Thursday to be up there. But a typical day, right? We're not in session this week, so I'll give you a typical day when we're not in session. Right now, I teach a Sunday school class at Grand Avenue Christian Church. I have somebody teaching my class for the next few months, so Rick and I can visit some churches on Sunday where we've been invited. So on Sunday morning, we either go to our church or we're going to another one right now. Then on Sunday afternoon, I like to keep Sunday to rest, do laundry, spend time with my kids and grandkids. But sometimes people will invite. I'm honored when somebody invites us to something. We'll get invited sometimes to somebody's Sunday night. You know, maybe their grandchild is having a program at church or something. And I see a few of you in here who know, we go to those. If we're invited, if my schedule's open and we're invited, it's an honor as far as I'm concerned to be invited to go to that. So we might do that. I have 2 legislative offices in district, one in Mount Vernon and one in Murfreesboro. Rule of thumb, I try to spend Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the Mount Vernon office and Tuesday, Thursday in the Murfreesboro office. They both have staff, but sometimes the staff is with us. I share those with Paul Schimpf. So Paul and I share both secretaries. So both secretaries know what's going on in the House and the Senate. That's not common in the legislature, so Paul and I are very proud of doing that. We can answer questions. Our staff can answer questions for you for the House and the Senate. And we keep them up to date on things that are going on. We both have meetings with them regularly. So, for instance, today, got up this morning, I answered about 150 emails and text messages, and then drove to Effingham for a meeting with the Illinois Library Association, and then shot back down here, changed my shirt and my jacket so I wouldn't smell this evening, and come here. When I'm finished tonight, I'll try to go home and fix Rick dinner. But sometimes we have things after this. And really, I fill almost every day up that way. So if sometimes in the morning, we'll have meetings at the office. Some people don't like to go to the office. So if you or someone that you know is uncomfortable about going to a legislative office, sometimes we have we have a large immigrant community here in this region. They're not comfortable going to the government. So quite often I'll meet them at Panera or someplace that makes them a little bit more comfortable. But I do not take a day off as a rule. Rick and I take a week off, and this year will be in April during that Easter period when we're not in session. Usually legislators hate each other about that time, so you kind of want to get away, leave your phone. We do that, and we try to take a week between Christmas and New Year's. But the rest of the time, I'm here. So.
And you're a part owner of a restaurant? Is that
I
right?
was. Yeah, that was years ago. Okay. We had the Bluebell. We built the Bluebell restaurant on the Ava Blacktop, so some people kind of knew us from that. I've had a wonderful life. I got married 2 weeks after I turned 18. Still married to Rick. We've been married 38 years. I've known him since I was 12. We're great friends and partners. Just have been on a great adventure our lives. About 3 months after we got married, we moved to Tulsa for 6 years. There was no work here. He was raising hogs. It was, if you all remember the early 80 and 81, he, right before we got married, borrowed about $250,000 at 21% interest. Do you remember those days? And then the bottom fell out of hogs. So when we tried to get out, we only got 50 cents on the dollar. I do remember, and some people have heard this before, I remember him coming home from having sold a litter of feeder pigs, and he said he had a check for I think it was $1,400. And I felt like someone took a anvil off my chest, because we could buy groceries, I could pay the rent, pay the car payment, put a little bit back for the farm payment that we had, and he said, no, I had to stop at FS, and I paid the feed bill. It was $1,700. And I said, seriously? Is this like a life or a hobby? Because I know people who spend less on their hobbies than this. So we kind of got out of it after that. But I have so we've owned a restaurant. We have some small business experience. I started working when I was 15. I actually was 14. I lied about my age. But my mom was a single parent. I had 2 younger siblings, and we all helped. So I started waiting tables at a Sambo's, was my first job. And I still can put 5 plates up my arm and carry a few glasses at the same time. I sold life insurance and got my securities license for Series 6 and 63, so I marketed mutual funds for a while. I didn't like the rejection that comes with that, so I went into politics, right? Much younger then. And so we had not had an easy life. It's been hard. We've worked really hard, and I think that's why I love Southern Illinois so much. Folks here, whether you are an academic from SIU, whether you are a farmer from Campbell Hill, whether you are an immigrant who came here just for school or came and then stayed, I think the work ethic here and the kindness that you feel from people here makes this a very unique part of the country. And then throw into that the Shawnee National Forest and all the other great things that we have here. I think I have a life that is charmed at this time. So charmed by the Lord, not by other things. So,
Other questions?
I've been riding Amtrak since 1979 when I went to high school, and I like Amtrak. I'm not going to beat up on it. It's not their fault. But is there any way to repurpose any of the high-speed rail dollars to go back to the basics, like new rail cars, the congestion in Chicago? Because it's good for Carbondale, Champaign, and all the way up.
So part of the motor fuel tax money is going to rail. It's hard sometimes to have this conversation here at home because it's not a popular conversation to have locally when we're talking about funding Metra and CTA. But so just imagine that there are 12 million people in the state of Illinois and 8 million of them live in the city of Chicago. Now, I want for us down here lots of road money because we have many, many needs here. But in the city of Chicago and the surrounding area, very often they don't even own cars, haven't owned cars for 5 or 10 years. So they're very dependent upon CTA and upon Metra and upon Amtrak. And just to give you an idea, if we had not been able to get them the money that they needed, and if you have 8 million people living there, and it really is the hub for many corporations in the country, it's very, very important that we keep the city of Chicago healthy. I know that's not a popular conversation to have here, but they are an economic driver for this state. So some of the money is going to Amtrak. I was part of a group called TFIC, and that Transportation for Illinois Coalition. They picked out some legislators that they called their transportation champions. I think they called us that because they were trying to build us up before they asked us to vote for a tax increase. But they took us to all different areas of the state. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. First of all, if we had not given the city of Chicago the money that they needed for some new rail, which includes some engines for Amtrak and some new cars and some repurposed cars, the Dan Ryan, if Metra shut down, the Dan Ryan would have to be expanded 12 lanes in both directions. Expanded by that much. So 24 more lanes in addition to what's already there. So if you've never been in that area and you know the congestion that's there, you must have Metra running. So it is important, not just for us to have Amtrak to go back and forth between here and Chicago, but it's also important for those folks who are working at the Willis Towers or wherever it happens to be. That's one of the data centers of the world, is right there in Chicago. There are some folks who have a very popular bill to secede from Chicago. All right, I am not a secessionist, and here's what I try to be a very practical legislator. For every dollar that we send to Springfield, we get about $3, and I don't know, this gets argued a little bit. I'm going to say $3. I think it's like $3.40 back to this area. For every dollar that Naperville, so one of the suburbs, sends to Chicago, they get about 30 cents back. So we do reap the benefits from the city of Chicago, even though often I think our argument should be more that we need more representation for our needs as opposed to we need to separate from them. So 177 legislators between the House and the Senate. About 105, depending on where you're counting them, 105 to 108 are in or around the city of Chicago. So we feel beaten up on sometimes here just because we don't have the sheer numbers that they have in the city of Chicago. So it means we have to be louder. So when you see this little blonde hair, well, it's blonde today, blonde hair, green-eyed Irish German shouting in what might seem to be a non-ladylike fashion, it's because I have to be able to make sure that our voice gets heard. And so back to your question about Amtrak. If you haven't ridden it lately, there's some pretty awesome repurposed cars. I don't think they're brand new. I think we purchased them. This is kind of funny, but not ha-ha funny. We purchased them from Pennsylvania, and I believe that they are the cars that we sold to Pennsylvania 10 years ago. True story. Yeah, so one of the places that TFIC took us was to Amtrak to show us the repurposing that they were doing. We also visited a bridge where, I don't know how far away it was because everything in Chicago looks so much closer since it's bigger. I think I could have thrown a rock and hit the Willis Tower from where I was. That bridge has about, I think they said 400,000 people per day that pass over on the bridge. They had to stand under the bridge. Under that bridge was plywood to catch the pieces of concrete that were breaking off the bridge. So here, when we talk about our roads and bridges, they're important to us because we have to get from point A to point B. We're moving grain for the world, but they also have a large number of individuals. So when we are talking about the state as a whole, I get that we have to take care of it as a whole, but I also get that it's Southern Illinois first. Okay, so new trains, hopefully coming soon. We still have 3 trains running, right? Working on making sure that continues.
One difference is here, if we have a bridge that doesn't work, we have to go miles.
Yes.
And miles. They have to go 1 block over.
That's true. And you know, there is a railroad trestle just south of Waltonville that I'm going into my 6th year now. So I've been working on this since my 2nd week in office. Working with the railroads is very, very difficult. Took 2 years to get the railroad that owns it to admit that they own it. And we are now at a place where we are, hopefully, they're going to take that down because I told them if they don't assure me that it's coming down in the spring, I'm going to have a press conference on that trestle because it has trees growing out of it. It hasn't functioned for 40 years, but farmers have to go almost 4 miles around with their equipment because our equipment is so large now, you can't get under the bridge anymore. And those are real issues for us here. I do want to tell you one more thing about a bridge. I'll talk all night, so you guys have to keep me on track. I want to tell you one of our bridge stories. I think the thing that really pushed me over the edge on not being nervous about voting for the infrastructure bill. There is a bridge, I'm not going to say where it is around here because I will tell you now that it is now safe, okay? But there was a video on this particular bridge. It went over a large span of water in this region. It was a nighttime video, and there was an IDOT employee, a supervisor, standing over the hole that was about this big with a pry bar. And he was hitting the hole with the pry bar, and pieces of the bridge were falling off. And it was a bridge still in use in this area. And I asked if I could have that video because I wanted to show it to people so they would know why this was so important. And I was told I couldn't have the video because in the background you can hear the IDOT official saying, I wouldn't let my kids or grandkids drive across this bridge. And so the other part of that infrastructure bill also is this, that not only are we going to see influx of money for our state roads and bridges, but it goes into the lockbox, so it can't be used for anything else. And we're also going to see 40% increase for municipalities, counties, and townships. So for those of us who are living on a township road, or I know in Murfreesboro, 20th Street's been a big deal there. Our water lines, sewer lines, some of them were built to be 40, 50 years old. Many of them are 75 years old. So when you see a road collapse, it's often because what's underneath that has collapsed. And so we're going to be needing to fix a lot of those things. And this money won't be used for that, but once the city finds the money to fix those things, we have the money to fix the road that's above it at this point. So
Linda?
Yes. Welcome, Representative.
thank you, Linda.
One of the things I want to thank you for is when I think about internships. John knows we send interns to Springfield, and they work in the House, they work in the Senate. Jacob Selzer, one of our interns, is now a law school student at the Ohio State. He was an intern on the House Republican staff. For the students in the room, if you would, could you talk about the value and the importance of internships at the state capitol?
Sure. You know, there's a learning curve for anyone that goes to Springfield. I was really blessed to have Mike Bost and Dave Luchtefeld there for so long, and they were kind of able to, I don't know, prepare me as much as they possibly could. But still, as a legislator or as a staff person, you get there, and I am telling you, not only are you lost about your job, but you're physically just lost. Like I learned a way, like, to when you're in the basement area, the tunnel area. There's like a little four-way where you can go over to the Howlett building or back to this little secret elevator that we have, or back over to the tunnel to go to the house, and you're underneath everything. Well, you're lost. So I can remember one day, I didn't want everyone to, it was like 3 weeks, and I'm thinking, 3 weeks here, I should be able to find my office. I should be able to find my way back over to the Stratton building, and I was lost. And so there were some people standing around, and I just said, oh, I forgot my cell phone, and walked back in another direction. And then when I realized where I was, oh, there it is. I was just all a lie. It was just a big lie, because I didn't want to be embarrassed about not knowing where I was. Well, you know, for interns, not only does it give you the ability to physically find your way around, but the contacts that you make, really, you cannot put a price tag on the importance of being able to, when a legislator says to you, here's my card, call me anytime, they really mean it. And for, you know, there are a lot of folks who really believe that everyone in Springfield is corrupt and everybody's out for themselves. And that's true of some people, but not the majority of those that are there. The majority want people to come behind them and be successful. I've always believed that you should, I'll say clone myself, not that I'm all that great, but you should be preparing someone to take your place long before you plan to leave wherever you're going. And for young people who come to Springfield on an internship, you're able to get connections with individuals that will last you for the rest of your life. And so you just can't put a dollar amount on it. If you have the ability to go, go. And I would also welcome two opportunities here. If you're a college student and you just want to come up and hang out, I'd be happy to have someone shadow me for a day or so. That's certainly welcome. If you are someone who has a child or grandchild or niece or nephew that really loves government, there's the ability, if they're 8 to 18, to be honorary page for a day. And we all love having those kids up there. I've had both of my grandkids, both my older granddaughters up there, as well as lots of folks from here in the district. They get a little badge that they get to keep. They get a certificate that says they were there. They get to be on the House floor with us while the adults have to be up in the gallery, so it's pretty cool. We all try to tip them, so they go home with a little bit of cash. But what's even better than that is we announce them from the House floor. And as someone who always loved government, this is what it means. It means that their name is written into the official record for the Illinois legislature, the same official record as Abraham Lincoln. So I tell the kids, come back in 50 years and look for your name in there with your grandkids, and then go back a couple hundred years and find Abraham Lincoln's, and you'll be in the same record with all of these great people that were here. So that invitation is always there for anybody that wants to bring. Just call the office and we'll get it set up for you. Got one in the back there and then back up here, I think. Well, you're the boss. You figure it out.
I'm going to call my wife.
All right. Hers, yeah. Her hand was up first.
Do you feel, even if you can answer this, do you feel that I think you described Governor Pritzker as an adversary as opposed to.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't mean to
No, it's not adversarial. It's just we're just not on the same page.
Do you feel like that most of your battles or differences in Springfield are between you and members of the other party, or are they more regional? Are they between and representatives of the other?
Yeah, I would say it may be more regional. It really doesn't boil down to Democrat, Republican. It boils down to worldview. I have a different worldview than some of the folks who sit in another part of the House floor. For a lot of reasons, I'm an evangelical Christian. That doesn't match up with some of my counterparts. I live in deep Southern Illinois. They might live in the city of Chicago. I may be, blonde hair, green eyed. They might have brown hair and brown eyes. They may have brown skin or black skin. So the challenge is trying to find something that you have common ground on. So I will use for an example, because I think she's been here before, Elaine Nekritz. So Elaine Nekritz is, if say we pigeonhole each other, all right? So I would call Elaine Nekritz a liberal, Democrat woman from Chicago, okay? We would be maybe politically on opposite ends of the spectrum. But when it came to getting Molly's Law passed, she's the person I sought out because she's very powerful on her side. So we didn't talk about what we didn't agree on. She's an attorney. And when I explained this particular issue to her, she is the chairman of the committee that I wanted that bill sent to. So I asked her to take a look at the bill, perhaps talk to the speaker, and see if we could get it moved from rules to a committee, and if at all possible, could we get it moved to hers? And then when I don't know if she did it or not, I think she did. When it went to her committee, she spoke to every member of her committee, and I got unanimous support and we actually had to break that into 2 bills, not just one, and it got unanimous support in her committees on 2 issues. One was FOIA, and the other was wrongful death, both of which can be very controversial. Very often the Black Caucus, Democrat Black Caucus, does not like to touch FOIA issues. They worked really hard to get the FOIA law in place, and they don't want to touch it at all. So to get every member of the committee, black, white, purple, green, yellow, whatever, unanimous support of that bill, I believe, was partly because Elaine Nekritz helped me with that bill. And so I think it's if you are real about your job, you're going to be looking for people that you can find common ground with, as opposed to spending a whole lot of time, even in this is campaign season, right? So some of us are going to be saying things that are a little bit more combative, but you still don't have to be a jackass, okay? You can talk about differences in your issues, and I'm very strongly opposed to some things and very much an advocate for some other things, but I don't have to make an enemy if there's another way to do it. So, and that's how Governor Pritzker is, I think. When we were here at SIU to announce the money for the communications building, there's a guy that I know who had his daughter there, and he's a hard Democrat through and through. And he walked up, and I saw his daughter standing there. I think she's a senior in high school this year. She's a junior in high school. And I said, do you want her to meet the governor? Yeah, that'd be great. So I brought her up close, and I introduced her to the governor, and her dad said, we're really good Democrats. I said, well, don't hold that against them like that. And Governor Pritzker says, you're probably trying to turn her. So we have some interaction I like him. I really like him. I just don't agree with him on much of anything, so it's all right. I mean, he doesn't agree with me either, but he likes me.
The word corruption has come up a couple times.
That's on my list.
Yeah. We've been reading in the newspaper, a state senator pled guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I think another representative,
He's going to plead guilty in a little bit.
Yeah, and there have been some other stuff. So
Yeah.
there's that long history.
Yeah.
And there have been attempts to do some stuff with the ethics laws that
Mm-hmm.
govern legislators. what's your feeling on the prospects of getting some change done this year in the legislature on ethics?
I think last spring there was an attempt right at the end of the session. What passed really was just smoke and mirrors. There are some individuals who would like to lay this all on lobbyists and say it's all about the lobbyists. I'm not one who thinks that lobbyists are all evil. They're the experts on a lot of topics. And we as legislators sometimes need a lobbyist to tell us about their, like, I know what I don't know. And I want to be educated on things that I don't know, especially right before I vote on them. So there are some good ones. There are some really bad ones. There's some bad legislators too. So let me take you back just a little bit. And for those who really don't know what, I know you're very well informed. But this kind of goes back to, it's going to go back several years ago. I think what has started to unfold began with a city alderman, Danny Solis, was wearing a wire for, I think, probably 3 years. In that wire, he caught up some other individuals. One of those individuals, he's a cooperating witness, so he's probably not going to do any jail time or whatever. He, in that wire, caught up a guy named Ed Burke. Ed Burke is the longest serving alderman in the city of Chicago. He has not been convicted, has not even been tried yet, but has been charged. Ed Burke is the husband of the sitting Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, Ann Burke. Ann, I don't believe, is caught up in this at all, but unfortunately, she's probably going to reap some of what happens with this. In that time, the difference between what we've seen, I'm going to have some more here in a minute, but the difference between what we've seen in the past and what we're seeing now is these are federal wires and federal prosecutors. They are not state, state police or any state agency. And when you get the feds involved, they don't really care what Illinois says. Their goal is to get Illinois straightened out. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I have a friend who has a friend that works in the federal prosecutor's office. They tell me that they have the most money that the Illinois Federal Prosecutor's Office has had ever, and were given orders by the president to clean up Illinois. So I think that's the approach that they're kind of taking. But with these wires, we have, and he still says it's not him, but everyone keeps saying that it's Senator Terri Link, supposedly wore a wire. In that wire, he caught up another legislator who was trying to bribe him to the tune of $2,500 a month for some sweepstakes legislation. In Illinois, believe it or not, you cannot be a lobbyist if you're a sitting legislator for state issues, but you can be a lobbyist for municipal issues. So a sitting legislator can be a registered lobbyist for the city, for a company to lobby the city of Chicago. So Representative Arroyo was caught on tape trying to bribe Senator Link. We think Senator Link, whatever. And then in addition to that, so Arroyo has now been charged. He pled not guilty this past week, but I think probably it's because he's still working his deal, and probably will plead guilty in a few months. Senator Martin Sandoval did plead guilty, and I think he's looking at somewhere around 10 years. Senator Link was wearing the wire because the IRS has him on some tax evasion and also on embezzlement of funds from the Teamsters. Now, so that's kind of the small layout of it. What we don't know yet is how long each person was wearing a wire and who they caught up in those wires. So they think Danny Solis was wearing it for about 3 years. No idea how long Terri Link was wearing one and who else was wearing one. So in Springfield right now, there are very few conversations going on. And sometimes you'll have someone like run their hand down your back before they start talking to you. Or I heard someone say the other day, I would just like to say that you do not have permission to record me in any manner. I don't even know if that works or not, but it was said. So people are legitimately nervous for very good reason. And I think it goes to, I know that there are differing opinions about term limits. I do think it goes to the issue of when you're there for too long, it can change you. I'm a person who believes that 10 years is enough, but 10 years in one chamber, then it's okay to go to the other chamber, and then it's okay to hold a statewide office, whatever. I don't want to limit, because we have great people out there, and once you get some experience under your belt, you hate to lose that experience. But I also know that it is intoxicating when you get there and you all of a sudden aren't even allowed to open your own door anymore. Oh, let me get that for you, Representative. Oh, let me pull that chair out for you, Representative. Oh, did you, here's a drink, and they stick a drink in your hand, and you don't even have to be a drinker, right? So it can be intoxicating to have that kind of treatment, and so you don't want to give it up. And I think that's a dangerous place for us to be. But because of all of this that's been going on, and because there is this great fear, and because it's become so evident that it is completely and totally out of control in a way that I don't think we've seen ever in Illinois. Maybe it was there, but we now have social media. We have around-the-clock, news sources. So we're seeing it in a way we've never seen it before. And I think that as we go into this next legislative session, we're really going to see some true reform. I think because there's no other options. But I was told, I remember someone asked me one time, why is Illinois so corrupt? And the person standing next to me said, because we love our gangsters. And being from this region, think about how much we love the Sheltons and the Burgers and the I would even say the Buddy Harrises and the, right? I mean, we have our own Murfreesboro gangster. I was in East St. Louis with Buster Worthman. We could name all of those off. We all love to read Bloody Williamson and all of the other things and we just had the 90th anniversary of Charlie Burger's hanging, and that kept everybody talking about it all day. So Illinois loves its gangsters, but I think we're at a place where we have to get resolution for this. Or how do you get good people to run? How do you get good people? I mean, I've worked hard to make my reputation and my husband's reputation a good, solid reputation, and then you get people saying, oh, dirty politicians. Well, why would anybody who's good want to do that for very long? Because you can soil that. I tell my son, really, our family has been in this region for 6 generations. I mean, my great-grandfather, we always still refer to as Großpapa because he came here from Germany, right? So you work hard to get that family reputation that's good. I have a son who's going to pass that name on, and I tell him frequently, you guard your name. It's what you have to give to the next generation, and good people are just not going to want to do it if we don't fix what this problem is.
Do we have one more question for Nathan?
Yeah, I think this is really good because you've talked about it twice now. Planting the seeds for the next generation of folks to get into politics and do all that. This is not a self-serving question. This is really an interest from the beginning when you were talking about it. What have you done that is kind of outside the box that has really started that and kind of built your political legacy by getting more folks in place to follow you through? I mean, whether it's finding somebody that fits in the 115th district as you take on the run for Senate, or like you said, getting family and family lineage and legacy involved in this.
Yep. That's a very good question. I would say I was grooming someone for the 115th. From my own personal experience, I went to Mike Bost and Dave Luchtefeld probably 6 or 7 years before I actually threw my hat in, right, and said, if either of you leave office, I want your seat. I'm not, I would never have run against them. I don't think they could have been beaten, to tell you the truth, but I, just didn't. But I wanted them to know that I wanted it, and then I began to go to campaign schools and do some of the things that get you ready for that. So I know how important that is. I'm the first woman to hold this seat in the House. I'll be the first woman to hold the seat in the Senate. I'm the only woman in the legislature south of the Metro East, ever. And so I wanted a woman to follow me in this seat only because I think that if you're the first, then you should be followed by another, and then it's up for grabs, right? Unfortunately, the person that I was grooming didn't feel like she was quite ready to do that yet. So I'll keep working with her and some other folks. But just as I said, like my granddaughter is 9 years old now, the middle one. And when I had her in Springfield this last year, I asked her on the House floor, what do you want to do when you grow up? And she said, I think I want to be the president. Now this is, she's the one that I didn't think was focused on anything political. The older one, I mean, she is, sometimes she's teaching me, right? But I said to her, I'm glad to hear you say that, because when I was about 5 years old, I remember telling my mom when I grew up I wanted to be the president. And my mom said, honey, little girls don't get to be president yet. But maybe when you're older, they will. So to hear that come out of a young girl's mouth and then watch, she was sitting in my seat, and even though she's not supposed to push my buttons, I let her vote my button. So to watch her do that, and then the other young people that have come up, when I have an intern that's working for my campaign, or any individual that comes up to the legislature, when they leave, I don't want them to love Terri Bryant. That's great if they do, but I want them to love government. And I think the real way to bring people along is to make sure that they love government. And I try very hard sometimes people will say, well, I'm a Democrat, could I do that? Well, I don't care what party you're from. Let's talk about the issues. Maybe I'll change your mind about what you are, But most of the time, I just want them to love government. This is going to sound like a campaign speech, but my entire life, I have believed that this is the greatest country in the world. And I've traveled. So when you go to other countries, in fact, I think the most eye-opening for me was going to Nicaragua just a couple of years ago, and going to a grocery store, and we had to go every 3 days because my friend's grandson is on the autism spectrum and will only eat chicken nuggets and pizza. So we had to go every 3 days to try to get one box of chicken nuggets at the grocery store because it's all they had, just one box of that, and to have people outside, soldiers outside with automatic firearms to make sure that nothing was going to happen, soldiers outside, and then you come back here and everything that we can do, I don't care how messed up we get, we're better than every place else in the world for what we are allowed to do as citizens. So my goal is to make everyone love government and then get engaged.
Well, Terri, thank you so much for a wonderful and I'm sure she'll take some questions as she makes her way to the car, and grab some pizza if you want to take that home so you don't have to fire up dinner tonight.
Yeah, I'm good. I'll stick around for a little bit in case I think I missed someone over here.
Okay.